Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk with Dana Balash, who is the sportscaster of WFMJ Channel 21. And Dana, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
It's good to be here, Father. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's funny because before we started the show, I was talking with Brother Dominic and Bob, who are behind the scenes, about what am I going to talk about, because I'm not a sports person, they are, and of course I hear it every morning. But let's talk a little bit about yourself, first of all, and then we'll kind of get into some of the work that you do. So tell the folks that are with us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm homegrown. I was born in Youngstown, 53 years old. I grew up in Hubbard, Ohio. I went to St. Patrick's School for 8 years, K through 8, and then went to Hubbard High School following graduation in 1982. Went to Kent State for a year and a half. Kind of knew what I wanted to do when I was in high school. I was the yearbook editor, wrote for the school paper. Back then there were no TV stations in schools, so I did the morning announcements. Went to Kent State for a year and a half, transferred to Youngstown State, and was very fortunate to start working in radio at WFMJ Radio while going to school. I was doing high school games on radio, doing some newscasts. Radio was sold in 1990, so I was in that position for 5 years, and then I became a general assignment reporter from 90 to 91, and then the sports position opened and was able to get that position, do the sports at 6 and 11, and since 1992 or 1991, I've been doing that ever since, and really enjoy what I do. Meet a lot of great people and obviously cover a lot of big sporting events.
Well, you know, you're a very familiar face to people who not only who watch Channel 21, but in the community as well. Let's go back to your earlier days. You started out in radio. What makes radio so important? I think nowadays a lot of people listen to the radio, and I think it's really a vehicle to really get some good information.
I think Father Corda, back in when I was in radio, there was people at radio stations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the format that our station was adult music, was the old-time big band music, and I thought people related to that. We would get phone calls. I was usually working the overnight shift where, you know, just monitoring things, and people would call us at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and I think we were an avenue for people to talk to. They wanted to know, you know, what was going on in the world of sports or in the news or the weather, because again, back then there was no internet. Right. You know, there were 3 television stations only. So I think we were an avenue for people, senior citizens, people who were up at night to call and say, okay, you know, how are you doing, and that sort of thing. And you got to know people by their voice, you know, and there were many people that would call us at those late hours or early morning hours just to say hello and how was your day going. And that's I think was the important thing back then.
Yeah. What does that tell you about people's need to kind of be in touch with other people, even though it's through the medium of the radio? You know, there's that whole sense that it's better for us to talk to someone one-on-one and face-to-face, but sometimes the only friend that someone has might be their radio or television.
Well, I think people were lonely or lonely. People are by themselves. There's a lot of people even now who live by themselves, and I think they need that avenue. And I think back in your early 90s, people kind of knew that you were going to be there or someone was going to be there, and they listened to the radio, they heard your voice doing the weather or an update, so they would call you, and that would make you feel good because at 2, 3 in the morning you knew someone was listening. I also think, you know, people were getting up earlier, you know, at that time. You know, there were more steel mill jobs and so on and so forth, and I think, you know, we were just an avenue for them to say hello and be a friend to someone. I mean, some of the people that I talked to is I think, you know, you never met them in person, but you talked to them on the phone. And I think it was important for us, but I think it was more important for them.
Yeah. You started out as a newscaster and then went into sports. Do you miss the news at all?
Yes and no sometimes. The last time I really put my news hat on was 9/11, which was very tragic for this country and the world, and sports became secondary. But in our field of work, I encourage young people to be, if you want to become sports, also get to learn weather and news. And at times on our station, for our morning shows on the weekend, they've had me fill in to do the morning show, which I feel very comfortable doing. You're known as a sportscaster, but I think when you have that versatility to do weather or do news, people respect you more, and not more, but people know you're able to do that, and I enjoy doing that. I mean, it's a little different for me sometimes to do that. I enjoy it, and I get calls about news stories. People will call me. Because they remember me from 20 years ago, being a reporter and so on and so forth. So I miss it a little bit, but news is serious. You're dealing with sometimes death and tragic. Sports is that lighthearted thing where you could kind of have fun with it.
It's when you were talking, the word that came to my mind was entertainment, and I think that really is what it is, because oftentimes that's. For us, a big industry in this country, to be entertained, and especially through sports. Why is sports so important for us as Americans?
Well, I think it's an outlet. I think when we, and people always come, they talk about news, and comments we get is all the news you put on is bad news. Right. Well, that's what news is. In this country, thousands of planes go up every day, but when there's that one plane that crashes, that's what news is. I think sports is an outlet because I think there's sports fans that are 5 years old and there's sports fans that are 95 years old. And we get calls all the time, from senior citizens, again, who may not have cable or don't know where the game is, what channel's the game on. So I think it's an outlet for those people to be proud of this region, Northeast Ohio, Western Pennsylvania. And I think it's an outlet for them to maybe get away from the daily news activity, the crime that we have, the drugs that we have. And I really think it's an outlet for them to smile and be proud of what this region's all about, including Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Yeah. We've got about 1 minute left of our segment before we go into a break. Very briefly, we know that news has really gotten a bad hit nowadays. Just briefly make a statement about that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our second segment.
Well, I think news is what news is. Again, majority of news that we have probably is not positive, but people want to know what's going on. And there's a fine line where our assignment editors and our supervisors make that decision. We try to be positive, but sometimes that's not possible.
We're going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
My name is Sister Mary Claudina, and I run a home for abandoned children. I want to take care of children who have no parents, because luckily I come from a very loving family. There are 8 of us. And I remember when one of my cousins got sick, and she called my mom and said, "Mom, the doctor has said that I might not have too long to live. Will you please raise my 3 children for me?" I remember we had a meeting at home, and my dad called a meeting, and my mom was explaining to all of us. And my father said, this powerful word, he said, "We already have 8. What is 3 more?" We learn to care for each other, to love each other, to fight among each other, to make up, to forgive, to just to be a family. And I think that's what I learned from home, and I wanted to share that with children who do not have that love and that opportunity just to know what a family is all about.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org. A message from the Catholic Church.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Dana Balash from WFMJ Channel 21. Dana, before the break, we were talking about news. I I think news is so vital and so important, and the need for it to be so transparent as well. But it's fallen on hard times for a lot of reasons. What can we do as people who provide news for the folks to do a better job?
Well, I think first of all is we want to hear about the good stories. You know, we want to hear about people who are doing good things, and sometimes we don't get those messages. We rely on a lot of viewers with email, with texting. You know, we want people to call us and say, hey, this person's doing this for their neighborhood, or this person's doing this. If you get us the story, then our supervisors make that determination. The crime that we see, you know, those are public records. Celebrities, you know, who do something wrong. That's what news is. Is that the right definition of news? Probably not, but that's what this business is. So that's changed, but you know, we want to hear good things. If we can put a newscast together with all positive news, that would be great.
It would be wonderful. It's rare that it happens.
It
that
is
way.
rare.
You know, some of the news, some of the national news, like once a week, devote a segment, usually their final segment, to some hero or some positive story, which I think is really important for us to kind of keep in the forefront, that news is not always bad.
No, and I think that's where the community and the public has to be aware to say, okay, if this person's doing something good in school, or if this organization is doing something to help the underprivileged, we want to know that. But we want to know that before it happens, because after the fact, then, I mean, we're television, so we need the visuals to go with that. And Father, some people are apprehensive to do that. You know, and that's their decision to make, and we respect that. But many times, you know, we'll get a call after the fact of something that, you know, this person did this for the community. And my response is, you know, even in the sports world is, you know, well, let us know beforehand, because then we can do something with it. But I think when people get over that apprehension of promoting themselves or promoting their church or their organization, then I think it's all good.
Let's talk about the community. You come in contact with a lot of people in the community. How important is that whole sense of having a positive relationship with the community, and how do you serve the community, but how does the community serve you?
Well, I think first of all, when community members want to promote what they're doing positive, and again, when there's positives, there's negatives, and we have to draw that line to what we're going to report on. But I think this community has to be more positive. I think people in the community need to be more positive. Not to say they're not, but again, you know, we want to promote what's going on. Our relationship with community members, with sports figures, is something that, you know, we'll always have, that I will always have. I think that's important. The toughest thing for me is when there's a sports celebrity in this area that does something wrong. You got to report on it. That's our job, and that's very difficult for me sometimes. But I think they respect what I do. I respect what they do. As long as you're fair, then I think there's no issues.
Let's talk about some of those sports people that you've come in contact with that have, for lack of a better word, influenced you or made you feel that what you're doing is really the right thing. Any people that stand out?
I think one is former Major League umpire John Hirschbeck from Poland. Here's his wife and Denise and their two daughters. I mean, they lost two sons to a rare disease. And John is probably one of the most positive people that I've ever come in contact with. Now has the Magic of Michael Foundation, which helps underprivileged organizations and kids in this area. And I think has really, really stepped up. I mean, lost his first child, I believe, in the early 90s, one just a couple of years ago. Knew it was his son's dream for him to continue umpiring for that year. When his son passed away in April of 2014 or 2013, you know, took that year off, umpired a couple of more years because that's what his son wanted to do. And John was one of those guys who doesn't like the spotlight. But does a lot of stuff behind the scenes that really people don't know about it. And I think what he's done in the direction that he's taken that Magic of Michael Foundation and what that family has gone through is unbelievable.
Yeah. When you experience those kind of events or those life moments, it really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
No question about it. I mean, you know, he is one of those guys where you know, his faith is very important to him, and that family, and those are difficult times for a family to lose one child and then to lose a second child, I mean, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And certainly, you know, his faith, I think, has gotten him through all this, him and his family.
Let's talk about family, too. You know, we talked about community. Family, your family, obviously, is extremely important. How does family come into play with your work and your vocation?
Well, I think first of all, family is important. I mean, in our sense, I mean, we're all older a little bit now, so sometimes it's difficult to get everybody together on certain days. I mean, I think Christmas and Easter are the most times we're together. My immediate family, you know, I have a brother who is a priest and champion, so he's close. My mother's still living. Another brother in Hudson, one in West Virginia, and my sister's in Hubbard. So, you know, we try to get together, and I think that's important. Sometimes you can't make it, but when you're married, you know, you have to go. Right. You know, there's, you know, sometimes we're all together, sometimes we're not, but I think we all understand that, you know, the time we are together is special.
Let's also talk about that whole element of faith, and I think in our final segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We've got about 2 minutes left of this middle segment. Faith and sports, do those two go in hand in hand at all?
No question about it. There are prayer groups with Youngstown State football. Coach Pelini makes sure that's important. Coach Tressel at the time always made sure that the players had a chance to attend Mass or have a priest come in or a pastor or a religious person come in to speak to them. I think that's vitally important. I see that more and more now. I know when teams come to play in the Hall of Fame game in Canton, the churches up there, I believe, open up their doors for the teams to come in. I see a lot of priests now traveling with teams, whether it's parochial or non-parochial. Or public schools, and I think that's important. So I think when young athletes, girls or boys, have an opportunity to speak to someone, you know, when it comes to religion, I think that's important, and I think I'm seeing it more now in athletics probably than I've ever seen before. After a big game, you know, an interview person says, "Hey, I want to thank God for giving me this opportunity." So I think that's important, and I think when young people see their heroes do that, then they're going to follow suit as well.
And we're going to talk more about that in a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. There is a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people from 7 states away will turn up at your door and give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will stretch out their hand and put it across your shoulders and say, "Everything is going to be okay." That place is called America, where we look out for each other, and it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
Whether it's passing on medicine, a blanket, or something as simple as a glass of water, that's how compassion works. And that's how Maryknoll works, hand to hand to hand. For nearly 100 years, Maryknoll's been passing on your help to the priests and brothers working in 26 countries around the world. Maryknoll, an American Catholic organization, dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, serving the world's poor and powerless. And that's how it works. Compassion flows from your hand to the hand of someone in need. Hand to hand to hand. That's Maryknoll.
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 That's Maryknoll. That's Maryknoll.
Well, I've been volunteering for 18, almost 20 years. What I do is help the elderly in their homes so that they can stay in their homes.
I think a lot of times the elderly in our society are forgotten, and that's unfortunate because they have so much wisdom to share.
The other day she told me that every night when she goes to bed, she thinks about her little angel, when her little angel's going to come and check on her the next day. And that's me, yeah.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Dana Balash from Channel 21. Dana, before our break, we were talking about faith. And faith really, I think, in all of our lives, whether we're Christian or Jewish or Orthodox, Protestant, whatever faith we are, or even no faith, that element really has to be there because there is some supreme being. There's someone greater than we are that hopefully helps us to put things more into perspective. Why and how is faith kind of managed or helped your life?
Well, I think, first of all, I went to parochial school for 8 years and at St. Pat's in Hubbard, and it was great. I think at that point you learn how important church is. I try not to miss. I try to go. If I can't go to my regular church, then you try to find somewhere else to go. And I just think it's part of everyday life. When I travel, I try to go, find a church, and go. And I've been in churches in, Washington State and places that I've traveled. And I just think that's important because, God is everywhere. Right. And sometimes, I think when we deal with death, you always kind of figure out why this happened. And I think, when you prepare yourself and go to Mass, on a weekly basis, I think that helps you prepare for those unfortunate incidents.
Before the break, you had mentioned celebrity sports figures who oftentimes, when something goes very right, they thank God first of all. Sometimes when that happens, people tend to think, well, that's really not true or that's not genuine. In your experience, do you find that to be genuine?
Well, I do, because I think, first of all, for these sports celebrities, baseball, football, basketball, whatever sport, they have a great talent. Well, how did they get that talent? They got that talent through God. So I think, you're seeing it more now. In baseball games, you'll see batters go up to the plate. Even at the high school level, I'll see them make the sign of the cross. A quarterback throws a touchdown or a receiver catches a touchdown, the first thing they do is look up. Sure. So I think there's different signs. Mm-hmm. They may not be evident to a lot of people, but I think if people watch sports and are sports fans, they'll see those signs. So I think it's important. I think athletes really take it true to heart. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's showmanship. I think they truly, truly mean it.
It's interesting because when you were talking about that, we know that in the Bible, St. Paul, I believe it's 1 Corinthians 9, talks about a race and an athlete. So there's that whole sense that sports has really been part of human life from probably the beginning, and yet God enters into all aspects of our life. And so that's really important.
And the thing, Father, that I just found out a couple of weeks ago is in Major League Baseball, several teams offer church services to the players, to the support staff, to both teams. Progressive Field in Cleveland does that, and I think there's only maybe 3 or 4 ballparks that don't do that. So and I'm sure there's chapel services for other sports. So and again, a lot of these players and athletes are playing on Sunday, right? And Sundays aren't what Sundays used to be. Exactly. I think Sunday's becoming, with all due respect, a normal day for a lot of people. So I was happy to see that. I think, what Major League Baseball at least has done, and I'm sure the NFL and any other sport, I think that makes people feel good when they can read that and see that.
Speaking of days, let's talk about your normal day. What's kind of part of it?
Well,
we just see you at certain times during the day. What goes
Well,
on?
I get there early. My philosophy is when you're on time, you're late. So technically, I don't work an 8-hour day. I get there probably 1:32 in the afternoon. But you're working at home because in this day and age with social media and with cell phones, people are calling you with, this and this going on and that going on. And for 2.5 minutes for the 6 o'clock news sportscast, I gotta get what's in the what I think is the right stuff and what's beneficial to our viewers. So I get there 2 o'clock, 1:30, kind of go through the day, prepare. I write my own stuff, write my own scripts. I edit my own video. I produce my own show. At 6 o'clock, we go up, hit the air at 6:25, on for 2.5 minutes, and then do the same thing at 11. Usually get home at about midnight, and don't watch all the sports at night. When I get home, kind of, because I'm doing it all day, kind of just take a break from that. Sometimes in the nice weather, go for a walk, but for the most part, it's a routine you're in. On summer days, it's very, very difficult because
Yes.
when the weather's nice, you're inside. But that's what we do. And you know, you talk about family. How we're involved with families is I experienced a very unique situation several years ago. I was somewhere and a elderly lady came to me and she goes, "Your name's in an obituary." I'm like, "Okay." So I went to look at the paper, and there was an elderly lady from Niles who passed away, and she mentioned me in her obituary as her favorite sportscaster. So when you mention family, we do affect families.
Sure, we do.
And I have that obituary on my desk. It hasn't left, you know, for several years. So we are part of extended families of people who watch us.
What can we do as consumers to be better consumers of news, of sports, of events that are going on around us? Because we get so inundated sometimes with the social media. How can we better use that?
Well, I think social media could be used a couple of different ways. Again, I'll go back to what I said. If someone is doing something positive, if you don't want to call us, send a message on social media. Social media has changed a lot of what we do in the aspect of, I think people want to know what's going on in the world as it happens. 15 years ago, we weren't able to do that because social media was not part of it. But again, I think being positive, of letting people know what's happening positive in your neighborhood, your church, your community. And I think that's where we can start and then build from there.
And how is that community at Channel 21? You've seen it change over the years. You've been part of it for a long time. How do you see it moving in the future?
Well, I think, first of all, we're locally owned, which I think is key. Our owners know who we are. They know who works for them and so on and so forth. And I just think that's so key. We're in downtown Youngstown, which downtown is coming back. I think with the university, the diocese, you know, all part of that now, and getting some of the blight out with the university. But our family, our WFMJ family, is very, you know, we're there. We try to put the best possible product on the air. We have, you know, and the nice thing about being downtown is the diocese downtown. So on Ash Wednesday, if people can't make it to Mass, you know, a visiting priest will come down or someone close to distribute ashes to City Hall and into that. So, but I think it's just being positive. I'm going to go back to that, where I think if we get that positive flow going in the community, in the churches, in the political system, then we take that step and then go to the next step of regionally, county-wise, and then certainly I think, you know, the sky's the limit after that.
Well, Dana Balash, it's a pleasure to have you on. Please give our friends at Channel 21 our best, and thank you for the wonderful interview and for your faith and for the great work that you do.
I appreciate you having me, and continued success to you.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.